Hi, I'm Mauro DePasquale. You're watching 508, and this is a show about Worcester.
Today on the show, we have Mauro DePasquale from television Soapbox on the set of Soapbox right here. Also on today's show, Brendan Melican.
How are you?
I'm doing good. And I am Mike Benedetti. Today we are here at WCCA, which
Changes everything.
It's Channel 13 in Worcester. It's the cable access station in the city. It's downtown, right over from City Hall on Main Street. And Mauro is the station manager, the executive director of WCCA. He's been doing this television show called Soapbox here for a long time. And you just finished up taping a day's worth of shows today, right?
Right. We shoot it on the last Monday of every month, and we generally do about a dozen shows on that last Monday. So it covers us for the month and beyond. We just finished show number 957 today.
So many shows.
Yeah, and most of those shows on average are 2 or more persons.
Mm-hmm.
So literally just one show in a public access station out of dozens like yours and others that has given thousands of people an opportunity to reach out and to tell their story and to ignite dialogue, and that's important because you really can't have democracy without dialogue. You can't have any kind of civilization, really. And as far as I'm concerned, it's still a free speech venue, and public access is slowly changing because of that. And they're getting away from what we used to be, that free speech venue. They're turning more to service provisions now because the funding is being taken away.
Well, let's talk about that. I want to talk about public access. I want to talk about the funding. Definitely want to talk about the show. Brendan, to the extent that you have questions, which I know you do, chime in.
I'll be here.
So, how did WCCA start? What was the origins of this place?
Oh, that's a good question. I wish I was more prepared for that. But it started many years ago, back in the 70s. There were a group of people. I'm not sure what the genesis was for organizing the actual public access activities in itself. And I suspect it had to do with cable being introduced into the city. By the time cable companies came into Worcester, and I'm talking after Consiglio put out some cable lines and knew he could make a lot of money, and when he sold these lines to cable companies, so he was pretty smart to go. So, but what happened was the cable companies, in order to justify their selling their cable lines, one of the means to justify that was, look, we're going to give you space for the community to use.
So hold on. So the cable companies put out these built the cable lines out.
Yeah.
And then they sold them to...
There was an electric company, a wire company actually, that put out the cables at first, from my understanding.
Okay.
Now what happened, he sold that to cable companies. He made it available. So when the first cable companies came into the city, by then there was already public access, there was already legislation through the Telecommunication Act that allowed for PEG access. They used that as sort of like a sell tool. You want us in the Worcester because we're going to give you, unlike the broadcasters, we're going to give you an opportunity for your citizens to have a channel where they can reflect their own interest and they can use it as they will.
And because that's part of the idea of public access is that you've got all these wires in the city. The city has... Does the city own the cable wires in the city, or just the right-of-way on the cable
It's a
wire?
right. So in exchange of, by the telecommunication law, in exchange of rights of way,
Okay.
right, the cable company gives something back to the cities. Now
Right.
it's not a mandate. It's not like they have to, okay? But the cities may ask for this, and they can't deny it.
And there's also there's legislation on the national level. There's legislation on the state level, right?
Right.
Which sort
That
of
supports that.
Right. Which sort of says that Worcester has, so in Worcester, for example, we have these cable wires. The city government controls these cable wires, right? And then they lease them, we could say, to a cable company?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's an exchange of rights away.
Okay.
I'm not sure it's necessarily considered like a lease, because the city still taxes them. They still get taxed. The city and state and federal still gets tax money.
Right.
In addition to that, they get what they call a cable franchise license fee.
Okay.
Now, with that license fee, the monies for that, the intention of those monies, from what I read, from the Telecommunications Act, and also on the state level, the intention was to give the citizens access to the channel. In order to access the channel, they also need the tools and the knowledge on how to do that. So this was the beginning of public access, the formal beginnings of public access. Now, the city of Worcester formed a board of people. They put together a board of people to start the first public access, and what they did is they assembled this group of people with the intentions that this group would wean themselves away from the city and form a nonprofit.
Okay.
And that's what happened.
Okay.
They formed a Now, prior to that, there was already public access activity happening. There were people in a barn up on Hammond Street.
Were they doing broadcast?
They were cable casting on Hammond Street, and I remember this because I was a lot younger then, and my band actually performed there. And I remember they had this pie chart on construction paper with a little arrow, and they had the different times set up around the construction paper. And here's what's next, and the kid would move it. And they had just a table with the recording devices on it and like one or two cameras. And they were recording right there. And there was I remember once we were playing there, we set up our equipment. I was really worried because the roof was leaking and all this. Years go by later, and I was involved more professionally as a musician and involved with studios, and somebody said to me, you ought to check out this TV station on Grove Street. So by then, they had formed a board. The board of directors put together its own bylaws. They became an independent, autonomous. This is what the cities wanted. Traditionally, the cities wanted a free speech venue. They wanted a venue where everyone would go, and they knew, the government didn't want to handle the risk of legislation. You couldn't be a free speech venue and be government, I guess the thinking was, and still turn away, like if I wanted to talk about my church, I can't do it.
Right.
Separation of church and state and all this stuff, liability issues. They said, look, form a board, you handle it.
Okay.
And this is what happened.
So in Worcester, this board and these people in the barn slowly merged together?
Slowly there was some kind of a merge. I'm not sure about what happened in there, but one of the founders was Father Bafara.
Sure.
And he later became the president of WCCA TV by the time I got involved with the station. I got involved with the station just as a volunteer.
Well, I didn't get into this, but I just want to recap, because we were just talking about the money angle.
Yeah.
And even though the money angle is the crass angle, it's also frequently the relevant angle.
Yeah.
Because people sometimes have concerns about, I think WCCA in particular, or cable access in general, like, why does the city of Worcester have these television stations and whatever? And again, my understanding is that it's because of state and national legislation, which says the city of Worcester, basically allows some company to run cable television in the city for some period of time, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. And again, this legislation says as part of this, the city can ask these guys for some money, and they're required to use that money to pay for things like, in Worcester, the government channel, the education channel, and the public access channel. So that I feel like people, whenever this negotiation comes up, it's done on the city level, and it's always a city issue.
Yeah.
But the existence of the negotiation itself, the existence of public access, educational, and government channels itself is not a city thing. It comes out of
Right.
state legislation.
Right, federal and state, yeah,
Okay.
it does. And
Okay.
and it's not necessarily that the government has to use the money for government channel or education. It's the people. It's supposed to be that the people would decide through a process called community ascertainment process.
Okay.
Where they would gather the community together, and they would say, basically, like what we did when we conducted our own community assessments. We gathered everyone, as many people as we could together, for all different walks of life here in the city, different cultures, different backgrounds. And we said, what do you want from this? We got some money to do this public access. What do you want? 100% of the shows that you see on this channel reflect the interests of our community. But what else do you want? Do you want us to train you better? Do you want us to be present? Do you need a crew to help you? Because let's face it, not everybody has the time to produce a TV show. So do you need somebody to go out and cover your event? What do you need? We asked. The city, the role of government should really be to make sure that happens. But it's kind of mutated. It's become, the city set itself to be up like a straw man. They're the middleman today. And now they dictate where that money goes and who's going to spend it. And it's our money. You're getting your share. We're getting our share. And that's the way it's gone. Unfortunately, because of that, there's a big decline in the funding for public access. Public access is now in trouble all over the nation because it's sort of kind of fell away. In small cities and small towns, for example, people aren't aware of this. They're not up on the information. So if the cable company comes in, cable company starts telling you what's right, and you buy it.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't be.
And those decisions as to how the money's allocated, that's done via the contracting process the city goes through?
The city
like
would-
every 10 years or so with charter?
How it's allocated is the city, again, the city should gather community together and ask the people, what do they want?
Is that kind of in theory what the cable commission should be doing?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. in theory.
In theory.
That's what it should be, yeah, it hasn't really reflected that. You know, and I don't mean to say we don't appreciate what we get from the
Sure.
city. We get funded, we get the lion's share of what's left over for the public access, but we're not getting the lion's share of that franchise. The city collects about 2.2 million dollars for its cable franchise. We get 750,000 roughly a year.
Okay.
On that. So we've been getting level funding for the last maybe 10 years. Of course, level dollars, but it's not the same as level value, because, you know, your cost of living, inflation, it's hard for us. That's caused serious challenges for us. Although the city did cut back, we originally were getting 60% of the PEG allocations. Now we're getting 55%, which is roughly translates to about 8 or 9% of our operation budgets we lost. We ended up losing, you know, staff position full-time. We lost a lot of stuff. It's hard to keep up with it.
Sure.
So we have to, and we don't expect the cable franchise to fund everything we do. We understand we have to raise funds, we have to go out and get grants and underwriters. Underwriters are our best means of support right now for what we do. But see, that's part of the problem. When you have a free speech platform, you don't want people to be paying for it.
Right.
You know, like directly like that. The city already collects taxes, it's getting taxes for that. It really needs to give this money back to the people so the people can do what it wants with that money. I think that's a key issue.
Well, let me ask you, Mauro, to switch back from the money and back to the human side of the story.
Yeah.
So you, Mauro DePasquale, musician, performer, how did you get involved in running a television station?
You know, somebody said to me, check out this station, there's a group of people and they seem to be having a blast. So I went to this building on Grove Street. It actually took me a while to get in. Every time I went there, they were closed for some reason. So finally I got in there. And I started playing around with the equipment. And I met this performance artist, Rich Goulas. He was the kind of guy, he was these performing artists that would, in New York, he would bury himself up to his neck in the middle of the New York Common there. And, you know, that was his performance art. I always thought of it as like a joke with no punchline, but don't go after me, artists out there. But you know, I appreciate it. But we had a blast. We were playing around with the equipment. We were, you know, creating shows like, we were getting involved with shows like Organic Vapor and you know, poetry, mixing poetry, music, you know, video distortion, you name it. We were doing whatever we could just to have fun with it. He was applying it to his art. I found a perfect marriage between that and music and the video, and I just fell in love with the whole place with that. Before I knew it, I was produced, at the time I think there was like 4 shows being produced at the station.
Okay.
They had already conducted maybe 1 or 2 workshops. I didn't take a workshop formally at that point. I don't think I could afford it, to be honest with you. But I just learned by experience, just playing around with Rich in the studio, having a good time. After a while, I was producing about 4 or 5 different shows. I ended up producing a comedy series, which we had a lot of fun. It was like Saturday Night Live kind of thing, off the hook. I played the host. I was Ricky Jam. And we just had a blast. That show took about 45 hours a week to produce, and it was a team of 15 people.
That is these shows are online too. If people
Yeah,
want
you
to
can
check
see
out
'em. Yeah.
old time Worcester cable access performance art, video performance, variety shows.
Yeah, and even then, you know, the station was struggling. You know, we had 1 computer, a Commodore computer, you know, and we were trying to make graphics, you know, and we were trying to do this and that. And it was unbelievable, but we learned so much, you know. You could do a lot with duct tape and clothespins, I'll tell you. It was a lot of fun. And I just kept doing it, and somebody, eventually they asked me to run the station. And I took on running the station as a performance art piece, actually.
Okay.
I decided, okay, this will be kind of groovy. Let's see what happens here. So I had to drop everything else I was doing because it demanded all my time. And here I am still today, like 27 years later, just about.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And the mission to me is really important. You know, I get phone calls, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, from people that want to come down. They're just here. They can't wait to get their day started because they want to come in and start producing something. Did you see, or they'll ask, did you see the piece? What'd you think of that? You know, they're just excited about it. There's other persons I know that struggled. One fella, his wife died early. He was a young guy. He was contemplating suicide. He needed something to do. He couldn't find a job. He came down here and started producing a show, and he's very happy. He moved on. ended up making new connections, new networking. He remarried. His whole life was put together. Another good information I heard, some people may or may not like the show, but a show called Close to Home. They talked about family issues, kind of a religious-based show. But, we know there were 2 babies that were saved because of that show. They were contemplating abortion. They didn't know that there was some alternative. So they ended up turning to this woman who was producing the show, and 2 kids are on this planet today because of that. So, excuse me, it's just, that was a really good show.
That is amazing.
How many of those really, really early morning annoying phone calls? They're just Counselor Rosen looking for extra time slots for his time.
Yeah, well, it's funny.
Mauro, I got an idea for a show. It's Gary Rosen.
Yeah. No, the councils have been pretty good, but you bring it up. We have Senator Chandler does a show from time to time. You'll see McGovern down here. Dan Donahue does a show down here. Gary Rosen does a show. Mo Bergman. There's a lot of activity from the political world, which is okay. But on the other side of it, you got neighborhood people down here. You have plenty of poor people. I mentioned Father Bafaro earlier. One of my favorite shows that he did was a show called Our Neighborhood. And all he did, this was many years ago, he just interviewed people from his neighborhood. And, you might see some old guy sitting at a park bench, and you would never think to talk to this guy. He may look like he's homeless even. Or you might see some woman who just shopping, in the grocery store. He would sit down with these people, talk with them, and you learn about their life story. And that's a significant, important, valuable piece of information. Not only is it historical, but it builds bridges. You learn about these people, and you go, that person, I always pass by that person. I just thought he was, bumming money. So, all of a sudden you realize this person has a history, he has a life. He's contributed. He's built important for this city. He probably worked on building the auditorium when he was a younger guy. It's incredible. And that show is one of my favorites. And one of these days we're going to archive all of those. We're still working on that. We got about 14,000 videotapes still in our library.
And you've got a lot of them online, but by no means 14,000 of them.
No, we have we're close to about 4,000 video works right now. We're about 3,900 video works are archived. So people don't realize that WCCA TV is a public access TV production facility. We're also, in a sense, a historical archive. We're a school for communication technology, and we're a community center all in one. And we're right downtown in the theater district. We were one of the first living organisms to actually be here during the later 90s and the early 2000s, because by then there was nobody downtown. There was somebody had like a little flower shop in the front window of our door here before we moved in here. And the way we moved in here was pretty interesting too, because
this is like an old bank, right?
This was an old bank. It was I forget the Home Federal Bank.
Okay.
And I would drive by this bank and think, wow, if there's any place to put a TV studio, that's a cool place, because you could see through the windows that it had high ceilings. On Grove Street, we had these poles, these support beams, every like 10 feet, and we ended up using them as props on the set. We couldn't use any lighting because we didn't have the space above head. We had to use floor lamps. And for me to go into our playback control room, I would have to literally, if I had to fix an equipment, if I had to get behind the rack, I would have to crawl out one window and crawl back in another window in the back so I can get at the rack. And that's how tight it was. So we would fantasize about this place. One day I was driving by here with Father Bafaro. We were on our way to some meeting. I said, hey, Father Mike, I said, that place would be beautiful to go in. I said, why don't you say, as a joke, I said, why don't you just say some prayers, do a novena, say a novena or something for us, maybe we can get that. He said, yeah, you think that'd be a good studio? Yeah. He goes, well, let me think about that. 2 days later, he called me up. He said, you're not going to believe this. He goes, you got the building. So I said, God, I said, thank you, God. It literally, sure we had the bishop come in and everything when we had our opening. I had to do that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, I want to testify briefly about public access and then have Brendan ask some questions. Public access has this, I don't know, you turn on public access and it's just like this weird thing, this sort of famously goofy thing, right? You have like Wayne's World, or you have Tim and Eric playing off of that, or Between Two Ferns. By the way, not ferns in this case, these are plastic rubber plants, I think.
Yeah.
But but there's a couple of trees over there. And that's definitely true that public access is a goofy and strange thing. And I've watched many, many hours of WCCA, and it's always been a weird experience. But at the same time, I don't know, people watch our show. This is always the amazing thing to me is, we get a little bit of feedback and a little bit of online whatever, but really half the feedback we get is from like people coming up to us at parades or just like the library. One time
ladies at the supermarket, that's all I get.
One time I was at the library working on my laptop, and this lady comes up. I was working with my friend. This lady comes up with a sign. She writes a sign and says, "Are you Mike Benedetti?" And my friend with me is like, "What is this?" She's like, "I love your show. You're doing important work."
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. You talk about just like getting to know the people in your neighborhood. Bruce the Snow Ghost Russell, who did a very popular show on here for many years, talked about this on his show. That he is a imposing looking character. Spends a lot of time in rough neighborhoods in Worcester, and always, I think people were intimidated by him. And he said after he started doing the show and people realized he's a total sweetheart, amazing sense of humor, it just like transformed his relationship with a lot of strangers who would come up to him and be like, "Hey, I like your show, I know who you are, let's talk." So I always thought that was amazing.
I got to give you this today,
Oh,
because
sure.
I got an email this morning from someone, I don't know if you've seen this yet, Mike. They were asking, they watched Snow Ghost in 2007,
I saw this, and they were looking to get a hold of
and
somebody.
they're looking to find a person that Bruce interviewed.
Sure, yeah.
So,
That's
to
how it
whoever
goes.
that may be, maybe you'll find that. So I left this information for you anyway,
Mm-hmm.
if you can take that with you later on. But you're surprised, because you don't know, like the stories I told, except for the person that was committed suicide, I did not know all those stories until after it happened.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't realize how you touch people.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else can be sitting there, and all of a sudden they see you talk, and it's like, oh, I didn't realize that. Or, the amount of hope you give somebody, because you're not just here doing the flashy, sexy, it's not the Kardashian kind of thing. You're really telling the story about how it really is. There are people suffering out there. There are
Yeah.
people that are happy. There are people that think life sucks and the whole place sucks. And just to know you're not alone is really important work. So
Brendan.
yeah, keep it up.
Yeah, so I really only have one question, and it's a genuine question that I hope you have an answer for. So you mentioned at the beginning storytelling, right? And that, for me, that's whether it be local television, local radio, that's really what it's all about, right? It's storytelling from like a local perspective, which we don't have much of anymore. And this is where I'm always torn personally, because I grew up being very much like a technology guy. And technology makes it easier and easier to get away from the local side of things, right? I mean, I got rid of broadcast radio for satellite radio, right? But then you're there for a couple of years and you realize, geez, I haven't heard a bit of local news in the last 2 or 3 years. And you go back starting to look for those things, and you realize that only so many customers can peel out before those institutions start to fall away. On the cable side of things, I mean, there seems to be a huge number of people, relatively small relative to the overall customer base, but who are starting to peel away from cable in favor of streaming video and whatnot that just might be more easily accessible. Long term, how does that actually play out for a station like this, what you do, and the funding or the access necessary to keep it viable? Because it's genuinely something that I can't figure out in my own head. Like, is there philosophically or morally, should you actually be forcing yourself into a local environment so you're actually engaged with the community via media, or should you just do what's in your best interest as a consumer and chase down the flashy, sexy internet-based stuff or new forms of broadcast that are always coming along?
Yeah. Obviously, I think it's a personal choice you have to make, but everything you do, what the world is, you're reaping what you sow.
Yeah.
And you have to engage local. We did a survey. We asked people, what do you know the most of? This was when Bush was president. Do you know what Bush is doing, or do you know what's going on in City Hall? More people know what was happening in Washington than they do right in their own backyard. And what touches you the most is what's happening here. Mm-hmm. And so many times, you hear these stories, like we got people with this controversy with the smart meters, for example. City Hall, City Council people will say, hey, it's beyond us, it's not within our authority to do this. It's under federal, state. Well, you know what? Every law that's made, you have an opportunity to go into a public hearing. It's a process where you can make your comments. You can stand up and fight something. Now, if you don't know that on a local level, there's a disconnect.
Right.
And that's why it's important. So, you know what? It doesn't have to be out of your authority. You could have been there in the first place and prevented that from becoming a law that takes it out of your hands, out of the hands of the people. So that's one of the reasons why it's really important to make a decision, I think. so that you're going to be encouraging local economy, local activity, local news and information. We present as an institution for media democracy, it's a place where there's a free flow of news and information without bias. I may or may not agree with something that's on this channel. It's not, but it's not about me. It's about what you want to put on this channel.
Right.
Pure and simple. So I think that's it. There are laws right now. The cable companies can get a lot of money for this channel. If they were to sell Channel 13 to like a Home Shopping or some other, they can make a big profit. It's valuable.
Yeah.
This is a value that the people deserve to have in their hands. We get $750,000 a year. Our return in just volunteer media value is way over $16 million back every year. What organization, what institution, what businesses are giving back to the people to use at their disposal to empower people? WCCA is doing that. And it's at risk right now because those phone companies, the mergers with Charter, the cable companies, they would just assume these channels go away. And, they'll say, well, it's an expense for us to keep that channel. It's a small expense for them to keep that channel in relative sense. Because what they want to do is take that and use it in the market, sell it. And you think your cable rates are going to go down, your phone rates are going to go down because there's no public access channels? I don't think so. And in places where it doesn't exist, those rates are just as high, I guarantee it. So it's not about money. You want to have technology, you want the access. I love to be able to Skype my kids in LA, or Phoenix, wherever they're all living today. But I don't want to give up on the local news and information, because when you give up on the local information and news and information, you're giving up on the people. This is the people's channel. Our slogan used to be Your Vision Television. And I meant that as like your vision television. Mike's sharing his vision when he does his show.
Sure.
You are when you're on this show. Thousands of people that have been on Soapbox, have shared their vision. I had just a couple of months of shows. Mike, you can
Yeah,
let's. Show.
So you started doing this show
amazing.
how long ago?
We started at the end of 1990, and there was another person I had hosted. And then I started on as host in 1991.
And so there is a ton of people like me and Brendan who have shows on WCCA where we interview people and we talk about whoever. This is sort of like the official station show, where it's like, if for whatever reason the Brendan Melikins of the world are not seeking you out, but you need to talk about your nonprofit, you need to talk about your church group, you need to talk about whatever you're working on, you call up the station and they're like, we will get you on Soapbox, and Mauro will talk to you.
Yeah, it's an easy access platform. You can come down here and make your very own TV show. You can use our studios, you can use our cameras. We even have classes year-round for youth and all ages to teach you how to use this equipment. You can present ready-made videos. You can do kind of a mix. You can shoot it with our camera and edit it at home, vice versa. You can do what you do, Mike. You edit it you shoot it on your phone and edit it at home. You take it down and get it on the air. Everything on our channel reflects the interest of our community, and that's what it's all about. So we give everybody these opportunities, and then we say, if you don't have time to do that, because it's a commitment.
It is.
You have to schedule it. You have to make sure,
Well, and like you said, you used to spend 45 hours a week making one show.
Just one show, yeah. And probably being conservative with that, because that doesn't include the music videos.
I can
that we
totally
produce.
believe it takes that amount of time. For some shows.
So it's incredible. So then we say, we got this platform called Soapbox where you can come in, and we also have like News 13 where you can do your own news clip. You can be your own news anchor person.
So we've got like 2 minutes.
To make it easy.
We've got like 2 minutes left. Can we run over some of the guests you had since these last 900
All
whatever
957.
All right.
I don't think, today we introduced like the Canal District. Over time and time, you've seen the sheriff's office. You had city councilors. You have the Joe Borelli and his veterans group. Members from the Arts Council were here. You had the WIC program. Fuel Assistance was here talking about that. I don't know if I said the Canal Fest. I think I probably did. We had a tax service come in, talking about taxes. What if you get audited? What do you do? Today we had the president of Consiglman College. We had the director from Mass MEP, which is the Massachusetts Extension Partnership, Manufacturing Extension Partnership. We had members from, we had Doug Grindle, who's a host for, he's a war correspondent. I mean, it goes on and on.
He's a war correspondent and sometime host of a WCCA
Yeah, he produced,
literally for the last 10 years, he's been like overseas on the front lines. It's amazing the variety of people who have shows on here.
Yeah, he taught people here, he teaches, gave classes on how to put together a news story. He produced GI Issue, which was a historical document interviewing war veterans from the World War II and the Korean War. I mean, amazing. And then he goes over to Afghanistan. And I mentioned earlier, I'm afraid to go to LA to visit my kids. He's getting shot at, and he's acting as a research and advisor now, and he's decided to run for rep. And, I mean, and then we got all the people we talked about that are like representatives that have been on this show as well. All kinds, EITC people from the Baptist Church here, the Mass, Craig Blaze has been here from the Worcester, the WBDC, the Health Commission, Brindisi's been here with the Health Department, you name it, it just goes on and on. UMass Medical.
Oh,
There's too many, I can't.
We're running over time,
Yep.
Mauro, but we can edit this and figure it out.
Yep.
Anyway, we're running over time, but we just want to say thanks for being on the show. Thanks for making this happen. Thanks for allowing our show to even be on television.
Well, it's not about me allowing it, but thank you. Thank you for doing it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, man.
All right. Thank you.
Pleasure.
This has been 508. We'll talk to you guys next week. Bye-bye.